Okay.
Okay, so I want to welcome everyone to, you know, not the Laura and I are happy to see each other. I know it's not a happy topic, life and grief through the holidays. This is the 2015 series, and what I want to do with everyone is just invite you to just be who you are, how you are. Um, there's no getting over this, you know. There's no having any kind of special timeline that we're racing against. It's a new way of relating to the person that we love who's died. And so I don't care, like if you're like me, like Laura, she's in the grief industry and helping people get through their grieving. She's still human and has her own feelings, just like I do. And so this is about sharing our stories. This whole series is about sharing our stories. And I really feel like that's a beautiful way to help each other cope. And so I just had this idea that instead of putting out like 10 tips or, you know, something crazy like that, which is, they're helpful, but I feel that maybe a daily story that will impact our heart and we can identify, because I think one of the biggest things, and maybe you can talk to us more about that, Laura, one of the biggest things I hear from people is they feel so isolated in their grieving, and like they're they know they're not, like I know I'm not the only one that lost my mom or that lost my grandmother, but sometimes I feel like I'm the only one that feels this way about it, you know? So anyway, welcome Laura Jack. We'll learn more about what she does in the grief world later, but I just know that you had a very poignant story about your mom, and I, you know, really identified and wanted you to share.
Yeah. Can I just first say thank you for having me? Yeah. And I also want to say that, you know, you mentioned the idea of being isolated and like, why is it we feel so isolated? And I think a lot of it's because we are so afraid of sharing our feelings because we're in this world where it's not okay or it's not safe to share how we feel. And oftentimes we're kind of shut down in our feelings most of the time. Like from the time we're pretty little, people are telling us not to feel bad. Don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. So I think that a lot of times we feel alone because we're all wandering around pretending that we're fine. Mm-hmm. So even though a lot of us are experiencing very similar emotions, pain, sadness, sometimes anxiety, loneliness, longing, like really longing for someone, we don't talk about it. We don't wear those feelings on our shoulders or on our sleeve because we're afraid of being judged, or we're afraid of, you know, upsetting someone or burdening someone. So I think there's a lot of it is just that we're walking around feeling like, oh, I can't let other people know how I feel because, you know, they don't understand. And in reality, and I don't know if you're a big fan of Brene Brown or not, but I love her idea that like vulnerability is what really brings us together. And so I think by being here today and sharing my story, and you always are sharing your story, it helps people understand like, oh, you're not alone. Right. And that like we're here together in this. And even though it hurts and it's hard, it's better to do it together than alone. So
beautiful.
Anyway. My story.
Yeah. Tell us about like when your mom, her illness, it was sudden, right?
She actually wasn't sick. She was walking down the street and she was hit and run over by a car. So it was unexpected to say the least. And we're coming up, January 5th is 8 years since she died. So, yeah, a lot's changed in my life since my mom's death, but my mom was very, very healthy. And it's actually one of the things that I find the most frustrating about her death is that she was one of those people who took like immaculate care of herself. She didn't eat, she made lots of cookies for everybody else and she never ate her own cookies. And, you know, she was always watching her figure and she was always doing all this stuff. But ultimately, I feel like it was, you know, she was exercising when she was killed. And it just seems so unfair that someone who, you know, was so healthy, like it just, they're all like, no matter how someone dies, it always sucks for the people who are left behind. Yeah. But, you know, just feeling like frustrated for her that she didn't get to experience the world at its fullest because she was always trying to take such good care of herself. And then she was killed in a totally different way. And what that's kind of done for me is just reminded me to, of course, there's everything in moderation, but to remember to live life fully, because you never know what tomorrow will bring. Right. And you never know if tomorrow's even, on the radar for you, or if it's a possibility. So, but my mom was my very best friend in the world, and she's just an amazing woman. And she had her things, she wasn't perfect, of course, but she was an amazing, amazing person. And she was a wonderful mother. She was a great friend. She was hilarious. And when she died, it just totally rocked my world. I was 25 years old, and I was like, what do I do now? Like, who am I without my mother? Because so much of how we define ourselves, and this is something I've come to the conclusion of over the last 8 years, but one of the things I've realized that we lose with great loss is we lose a sense of who we are. Like, who am I without this person? Mm-hmm. Or without this experience. If you lost something that wasn't a person, you may have lost your job, or who am I without this job? For me, it was, who am I without my mother? Yeah. And I still struggle with that sometimes, because as you know, I had a baby 13 months ago, and having a baby is awesome. And like, having a baby without your mom is really hard, because you just want her around. I wanted to know what she would think about, I want to know what she thinks about stuff. Yeah. I wanted to know what she would have done in my pregnant, like when I was pregnant, I was like, what would my mom say about this? Cause right. I was too young to really talk to her about that when she died. So we never had those kinds of conversations that are relevant now, so it's just a little bit, I still have grief about, it's a constant, what we call in grief recovery is it's constant completion. It's like all these new things keep coming up, and then we have to complete them again. And so
8 years out, because I've been talking to several people, not everybody's been wanting to share on this series, and I totally understand that. But I've had a few people even say that as the years go on, it's getting harder for them. So I guess what I wanted to ask you is, as the years have gone on, what's it like? How is it any different for you?
Do you mind if I touch on the first thing you said first, and then I'll talk about myself?
Yeah.
I can't help but be a teacher, because I'm a trainer for the Grief Recovery Institute. I teach certification trainings for people who want to become grief recovery specialists. So these are questions that I get a lot, mm-hmm. Not only from grievers themselves, which we all are, yeah, but also from the people who are wanting to become certified specialists. So they're like, what, why does it get harder sometimes? And the thing is, and this is one of the biggest myths about grief that exists out there, is that time heals all wounds. That's the myth. Right. So we have this myth that says time heals all wounds. And so we expect, or we wait for time to heal us. And in reality, and this is, something I teach for grief recovery, but time doesn't heal our wounds. We have to take action within time to heal our wounds. Time just passes. And if we I love to compare it to a wound, like a physical wound. Like, say you were to cut your arm open, and you're like, you know what? I'll just give it time. Like, nothing's going to happen. And in fact, you probably will get an infection. It will get worse and worse, to the point where you might lose your limb. You may end up dying, because the infection might spread throughout your body. The same is true with a broken heart. It's just not visible. But if you wait for time to heal it, yeah, it gets worse. The infection spreads. Everything feels bigger and harder and more painful, because there's this infection spreading. And, I don't know about you, but I know that I've had an infection before, where I had like a pretty deep cut on my hand. And I was actually abroad at the time, and I was like, oh, it'll be fine. It'll heal itself. no, like days passed. I finally went to a pharmacy. I was actually in Thailand. I went to a pharmacy. Fortunately, the pharmacy's there. You don't have to be a doctor. The pharmacist just gives you antibiotics. And the pharmacist was like, yeah, your infection's spreading. You know, when the infection's spreading towards your heart, it's really, it can be dangerous. And you can see because it's all red. The danger of a broken heart is that you can't see it physically, but it's the disease, the pain is spreading. And that's why we have like road rage and other blow-ups where we get like kind of mad at things that don't seem related or relevant. Or somebody says, have a nice day. And you're like, leave me alone. And you're like, it's because the infection of pain of the grief is spreading because we haven't done anything about it.
I feel the same way. I feel like there's a whole, I feel like unresolved grief, untended grief, unacknowledged grief is probably the root of everything. That's my opinion. I really do. I think it's that pervasive.
Oh, it's everywhere because grief is not just about death. Mm-hmm. Grief goes beyond death, and death is one major loss. But grief is the loss of anything.
Well, let's get back to, we'll go into all this. Yeah. I knew we would do this. I knew we would do this. But I just want to start with your story. So tell me, now as time goes on, what's happened with you and your mom?
So for me, again, I've taken major action within time. So over the last 8 years, I've done everything I could, everything that I've been able to do, everything I've found to help myself. And honestly, like, the holidays, like, it doesn't faze me any differently than any other time of year. Okay. There may be something that comes up. Like I mentioned, getting pregnant, like where I was like really missing my mom, and that was painful again. Yeah. And then I had to do some work around it. And then I, did my completion work, and then I felt better. Right. But it's like knowing that it's constantly coming up. So my mom loves Christmas music. And I grew up being Jewish, so I always thought that was kind of funny that she like loved the holidays and she loved Christmas lights and whatever. Mm-hmm. And so during the holidays now, I seek those things that used to hurt when she first died. Like, oh, it's Christmas and my mom's not here to enjoy the lights. Now I like go seeking lights to enjoy, like to feel closer to my mom. Yeah. So like one of the things that I work with clients for is I'm like, what are things that you would have done with the person that you miss? So for me, like we loved like making hot cocoa and like, sitting by a fire, even if it wasn't cold outside, because growing up in Texas, it's not always cold in the winter. But, we would make hot chocolate and we'd sit by the fire. We'd even sometimes turn the AC on just so it was cold in the house so that we would enjoy the warmth. And so I'll do those kinds of things thinking about my mom. I'll do those things and I'll talk about my mom and I'll talk about how much I miss her. And my mom was an incredible gift giver, and that's not my number one love language. That's not how I show my love, but I always like loved how good at that she was. And so like this time of year, I miss that. I miss like how good she was at gifts. Cause I always got excited to see like, what would she come up with this year? Mm-hmm. So I definitely like have those longing feelings for her. And like one of the ways that I work with it or move through it is I allow myself to feel it. If I'm sad and I miss her, I cry. I like talk about her. Like when I'll go home this weekend to Sugar Land where I'm from, and I'll see my dad and my stepmom. And, I'm sure there will be a moment where we talk about her and she'll, like we'll miss her and we'll tell stories. And if I feel sad, I just allow myself to cry and I let it be okay. And for me, I'm in this really interesting place because if I cry and people are like, oh, don't worry. I'm like, no, it's okay that I'm sad. Like, so I'll correct them and be like, no, it's okay. It's okay that I'm sad. This is normal. Mm-hmm. But like a lot of people don't know that they can do that. So I invite you and like anyone who's listening or hears this recording to know, like, you can say to people, it's okay for me to feel sad. It's normal for me to miss my, for me, my mom, for maybe for you, your mom. Like, it's okay for us to miss them. Like, it's normal because it was a time of year where, things kind of, you go off of your kind of routine. So you're kind of out of like that normal thing that you usually do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we miss them like seemingly more than normal, because it's like we have some more reflection time, like things slow down a little bit. And I know they get crazy and busy in some ways, but they also, we're not at work. We're not going through our daily routine.
Mm-hmm.
So like we just kind of notice things more. So like for me, I notice the lights, and I notice, you know, I do those kinds of things in her honor and her memory.
Okay. I really love that. I love that you move from, and that acknowledging that it is painful in the beginning sometimes, that we don't go immediately getting comfort from what they loved at any time of the year, right? But that it has turned into you for you, because of the active role you've played in trying to cope with it, that now you seek out the things that remind you of her.
Oh yeah. And then my whole family does it now. Like, I feel like in that week, we always talk about my mom.
So
it's not a taboo
things
subject in our family.
Like, okay, so there's different thought around grief and grieving. Some is that, why would you ever get over it? You love that person. That person was part of you in your world. So why is the big push to get over it? You see what I mean? I've heard.
Right. So it's not about getting over it like the person. It's about letting go of the pain, because the pain it inhibits us from living. And so it's, to me, grief it's not about like moving on away from the person. It's about moving away from the pain, like letting go of the pain so that we can be free to live our lives as fully as possible. Yeah. So, I mean, to me, it's not about not feeling
getting
or
the person.
getting over it.
I knew you were going to address this good.
Yeah. It's not about getting over them, because like clearly I have a relationship with my mom. She's not here, but like I still think of her. I still feel her presence. I still like talk about her as much as I can. I still love her. And look, you're looking at like an 8 years past person who's also dedicated the last 8 years to grief and understanding grief. So anybody who's watching who's like, how come I don't feel this way? Well, look, I've done a lot of
that has been.
So like, yeah, well, so for me, it started with going to massage school. I went to massage school, and that obviously my path is going to be different than anybody's path, because we're all unique, but I'll tell you what I did, right? So I went to massage school. I wanted to do something different. I moved away from where I was living. I was living in Panama when my mom died, and sorry, I live by the train, so you can probably hear the train, but I lived in Panama. I was, running a hostel and kind of having this like crazy life, and it was really awesome. And when she died, I really couldn't keep up with that anymore, because I couldn't pretend that I was fine. And that kind of lifestyle where you're head of the party, and you're kind of like, you're always helping people enjoy their environment as much as possible. Like, I just didn't feel like that was true for me at that moment. I couldn't help other people have a good time. Like that I wasn't happy. I was devastated about my mom's death. And so I moved back to the States with my then boyfriend, my now husband, and moved up to Seattle, Washington, where he's from, and my brother was living there. And I decided that I needed something different, and that I had always wanted to go to massage school. So, or do some kind of healing art, like something that helped people. And so for me, like what massage school represents, if I were to tell other people like what to look for, is like following my heart. One of the things about grief that's super amazing is that it is like this unraveling of sorts. So it kind of like takes off the cloak of social necessity. Like you do everything because you're supposed to by society standards. And it really allows you to tap back into like your essential self, the essence of who you are and your passions. So if you allow that, if you open yourself up to the fact that, you're like almost disrobing this social self, it allows you to tap into, okay, like what do I what have I always kind of wanted to do? And it happens naturally. It's like a natural stripping away that happens. But if you let it happen, if you like allow it, then you can tap into like, what have I always wanted to try? And I wanted to be a massage therapist. So I started with that. So I went to massage school. That was an amazing experience. Part of why I think massage is so powerful is because physical touch really is another type of release. It allows you to release when somebody touches you. Totally. It's connection. It's love. It's a healthy touch. Not all touch is healthy, but massage therapy is a healthy touch. And for me, I wasn't really able to cry for those first 9 months after my mom died. I didn't know how to release that, especially in front of anybody besides maybe at home at night by myself or with my husband. So I just allowed myself to feel. And that touch really allowed me to release some emotion that I was holding on inside. So for me, it was reaching in, following.
I'm sorry, is that coming from your house?
That was my first step.
Okay.
It's the train.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't have to adjust anything because I was like, where am I going to adjust? No, it's okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it's super loud. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Should I come closer? I know. It's
I know
very
you're
annoying,
in downtown.
especially when you're sleeping.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was my first step, was like reaching in and following my heart. For me, I didn't necessarily, it's easier for me to look back and see the process than it was at the time. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that I needed to do something else. And that's part of why I'm a grief coach, because I feel like now that I've been through all these different processes to try to help myself, now I would like to make it easier for other people, because I wish somebody would have been there to guide me and be like, okay, let me just love you through this and guide you on a path. Right. So, so I say that the first step is usually acknowledging what you're going through, acknowledging and honoring.
And you don't know what you're going to do. Like, I remember when my mom died, one of the first things I did is, before she died, I called it Jamaican blue. My house was outside this beautiful, bright blue, Jamaican blue, and I had bright gold inside. I had hanging things with flashing mirror thing. I just had all kinds of fun, beautiful, colorful glass and things like that. When she died, I hired, and I always do everything myself. I hired professionals to come, and they painted the whole house. The outside was a brick, like a dark conservative brick, and I re-roofed the house to match that. And the inside went taupe. And it was dark midnight blue in the rooms that weren't taupe. And I took down all my hanging. I could not cope with the visual stimulation. And it was too loud. Everything was too loud, too much stimulation. And so my house is still that color, that brick color, and I like it, but it's time for the end. Now, it's been 10 years, but I noticed the last couple of years I'm going, I'm okay now to change the color in here. And I've been adding for maybe the past 4 or 5 years, hanging things again, Yeah.
Well, and I noticed behind you, your tree is all full of lights.
Yeah, and that's exactly, that kind of stuff is coming back. Not that I have it connected to my mom, but I noticed the thing about able to bring in visual stimulation. So, yeah.
And, I think it also has something to do, at least tell me if this resonates for you, but when I hear you say that you had to take down all the lights and take down all, paint it all, it was almost part of your grieving process, was to because to me, one of the things that happens is that it is a dark place. It's a dismantling. It's like the fire burns you to the ground, and you almost have to your physical world kind of just represented that. And one of the reasons why my business is Light After Loss is because it's all about finding that light again, bringing out those beautiful lights, letting your self-expression and your personality shine again. Because I feel like after my mom died, and it sounds like for you as well, I didn't have it in me. I couldn't be the bells and whistles person that I had been before. And I think when people experience deep loss, you just feel like empty and, some shell of the version of your former self. But there's so much on the inside that just feels like it's dark and vacant, and I think you see that with people. And I know that I had it in myself. And like, you can see it in people's eyes, that like just kind of darkness or like absence. And so I think that your physical world sounds like represented some of the internal struggle that you were having. And now you're like, okay, now it's time to like add the lights back. It's time to like add some of that flair that the Deanna of the past, had and has. It's still in you.
It's just interesting to see yourself, because in retrospect, you can see totally outside of my character to hire professional painters. I mean, are you kidding me? They cost thousands of dollars. I paint everything myself, or I get my family and friends to come. But it was important to me that it was done right, done well, look good, look classy. But I needed the colors muted, and I needed it done now. I didn't have time to mess around. I didn't want to. And I remember for a couple of years, I couldn't hardly tolerate dealing with people in the outside world. I just didn't have.
Which is why I moved away from Panama. I couldn't deal with the party. I couldn't deal with having to walk around and pretend to be happy and fine. Because my heart was hurting.
The path of honoring ourselves and whatever it is, it's like, I'm in hospice. I was in hospice before my mom died, and not a grief counselor, not a bereavement specialist, nothing like that. I know the other side of life. I know as someone's dying, anticipatory grief, that kind of stuff. Technically, I know, and experientially, I know, but not the bereavement mourning side. Like, I don't know, like I don't have an expertise in that. And so I thought it was so interesting when I saw you post on Facebook. We're Facebook friends, and I thought, Laura, I would love Laura to come, because I don't know you very well, but we've met with each other over the years, and I've taken your course. Thank you for inviting me to your course. She has a wonderful course. Anybody who reads this, listens to this. So I really enjoy the structure of what you're delivering there as a great tool to help if anybody feels like they just want a little love and some direction around, okay, so I get it. I need to actively do something. I don't know what, but this could be a great first step to come to you and you walk with them a little bit. So I wanted to bring you here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm so glad that you came and participated in that course with me. And yeah, I'm actually in the process. It's going to probably launch in January again. It's called the ABCs of Surviving to Thriving. So I've simplified it a little bit since you took it, just because it was, for grievers, when we're in a deep, dark place, like it's hard to focus. It's hard to concentrate. So if you're out there in the world and you're like, why can't I focus?
What we'll do then when we're done is send me your link to that, and I'll put it in your day, okay? So that way we'll have your website. Yeah. Great. Okay. Do you have any thoughts about now, because you do the work that you do and you've worked with a lot of people and you're young, okay? So are you working with young people, or are you working with older folks, old people like me? I mean, I'm in my 50s,
I don't discriminate. The only people who discriminate are the people who aren't willing to work with me because I'm young. But I don't think that age really has a lot to do with it, because anybody can experience loss. And, you meet little kids who have experienced tremendous loss. I just happen to have, taken lots of action to help myself. And I've been helping myself and other people for many years already. Yeah. So, and I kind of have always been a little bit of this kind of person that people came to
when I got together with you the first time, I could feel that. You have that wise spirit, totally.
Thank you. I don't, when I lead trainings, I lead these 4-day certifications for people to become grief recovery specialists through the Grief Recovery Institute. And the first day when people come, because a lot of the people I'm training are psychologists and counselors, LCSW, social workers, clergy, you name it, funeral directors, We haven't actually had a death doula, but we do get a lot of people from hospice. And I know. So I lead these trainings, but the first day when people walk in, you know, most of these people are probably 40s, 50s, 60s. And they're like, you know, you can just like sense that they're like, who are you? And why, how are you our teacher? And I'm like, you know, I'm here. So that's how I'm your teacher. But I love it. I feel a lot of passion for my work. And I don't think it, again, you know, I don't discriminate on who comes to me.
Why I bring it up is I get it a lot.
Kind of
I'm 54, but often people say, you look 40, or you look, you know, sometimes on a good day, I might even look like today I feel 60, but you know, some days the people are saying, you're so young, you know, oh my goodness, how would you know, or you have such depth for being so young. And I'm like, well, I'm really not that young. I guess I am to an 80-year-old, but you know, to my 20.
Exactly. We look like high schoolers.
I don't know. I just wondered if you ever got that, you know, any.
Yeah, I totally do. But, you know, I let people find me, and if they let me love them, I will. So I love them anyway, usually, even if they don't let me.
Oh, I bet.
I find my way into their heart.
I'm going to ask anybody out here that wants to join us in the open seat. I'm not exactly sure how that works. Do I invite you? Do you want to step into the open seat? Just share a story with us. And I'm going to wait a second here to see if Lauren, do you, or Grant, God Explorer, I'm not sure what your name is, but anybody here want to share a story or an insight or something that helped you through this time period? Like, you know, you were saying, Laura, it's this time of year is the same as any other time of year. I know for me, I feel that way too about the different people that have died. Yeah. I think it's like almost, what was the special time that we shared? Was it summers? Did we always do summer vacation, or did we do certain things in the spring? Right? It's not.
Well, the reason why this time of year is a big deal for a lot of people is because this time of year has a lot of triggers. So there are a lot of like very special things about this time of year, like Thanksgiving, and there's Christmas, and there's Hanukkah, and there's all sorts of holidays. There's travel, there's all the stuff that, you know, there's lights, and there's smells, and there's all sorts of things that help people reminisce or remember someone or a time past or whatever. So I think that it's not that the time of year is so different. It's more that there's more triggers that people associate with a person. And so they bring up old memories. And so if you're not looking at those memories regularly, if you're not looking at that person or thinking about that person, and you're trying to suppress your memories or suppress the pain, then this is the time of year where it's like constantly like pulling at your heartstrings, because it's reminding you of that person. And if you're trying to like ignore it or shove it under the rug, you're going to be pretty sad, because all of a sudden there's all these things that are kind of constantly poking at you. And the reason why maybe it doesn't affect me or you as much my mom died January 5th. So this is like right around that time of year. And it's because we're kind of in conscious awareness of it. I'm constantly thinking about her. I'm constantly aware of like the things that bring up pain. And you know what? Those few days before her death, I always feel a little sad. Like I do. And I just let myself feel sad. And I talk about it. I tell my husband, I'm like, I feel a little sad. I miss my mom. And sometimes I'll cry about it. Like I'll just have some tears, and I live through the tears. Like I allow myself to feel them. I don't brush them away. Yeah. I don't, shut them down. I try to feel them. And that is a big step for me, because I used to just try to pretend to be strong.
Oh, Lord, it's painful. Yeah, it does. Totally.
Does that make sense?
Totally. And I love to hear different people's perspective on it, whether they're in the end of life field or not, about even if there's 100 experts, they might have 100 different thoughts about what we do or how we should view it to be healthy, right? There's really not, I've never heard many experts agree on all the angles around it.
No, I think the only thing that at least the only thing that I could say that we could all agree on is that you have to feel your feelings. Like the more we try to shove them away, the more they're gonna. One of my mentors used to say, or says, I'm sure still, but she said, what we resist persists. So if we resist the pain, if we resist the feelings, it's going to persist because it's trying to get our attention. It's trying to let us feel. And, one of my past clients said this, and I don't want to, she said, all loss deserves to be honored with grief. And I love that. Her name is Marf Fetter. And she said, all loss deserves to be honored with grief. And I think that is, it goes right hand in hand with you have to feel your feelings. But, if we allow ourselves to feel, if we allow ourselves to honor and acknowledge the feelings that we have, the grief we have, then it's a lot easier to move through it.
Wow, Laura, thank you for everything. Thank you so much. I think people are kind of listening in. And I appreciate the work you're doing to help people get I don't know what it is, get a grip on grief. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's like, in a way, I want people to get a grip on it. I want you to not just think it's not about, you're never going to have it. Or if you cope well, you won't have it. Or if there's a lot of things that people think, and they think they're being healthy around it, and wonder why that their life might be going down in functioning. They might be functioning less well or whatever. So, I love the work you're doing. Anybody who's doing any work to bring consciousness to loss, death, pain, our own mortality, all of that stuff, so we can live well. The whole point is to be joyfully here while we're here and serving other people, right?
Yeah. Right. I have to share one other thought. That another client said to me, and it's really stuck with me, but he said, his wife had died, a few months earlier before we started working together, and she died suddenly. And he said, after about 6 months of working together, he said, I feel closer to her now that I'm thriving than I did when I was just surviving. And, and that stays with me so much. Anytime people are so afraid to feel better, partially because the pain is all they have associated with that person. But what if you can feel closer to the person if you're doing well rather than feeling in pain? Like, what if you can feel close? I feel closer to my mom because I'm thriving in my life. I know she would just be so proud, just like looking down at me and being so glad that I am like taking advantage of my life, because she doesn't get to take advantage of hers. So, you don't want to die with them. That doesn't honor them. Dying
doesn't honor them. No.
And they don't want us to. They wouldn't want us to. My mom would be devastated if I were still on a ball on the floor, not leaving the house every day of my life, because that doesn't honor me. It doesn't honor her, and it doesn't honor the world that we live in, this gift that we have to be in the world. It's a gift, and it's not everlasting. It's brief. Our time here is brief. And so it's really powerful to just really allow ourselves to feel our feelings, feel our pain, and feel our joy. When you're laughing or you have a good day or a good moment, let that be okay too.